Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome. It's great to have you join us today. I'm Kay Hussain, and I have the pleasure of leading the wonderful WISE team. So our only regret today was having to cancel the face-to-face event because of the rail strike, only to find the rail strike was subsequently cancelled. So our apologies to those of you that were really looking forward to in-person conversations today, and a huge thank you to WSP for being so flexible with all of the required changes. And we're keeping our fingers firmly crossed for next time. So just before we get started, I need to take you through some housekeeping points. Next slide, please. So delegate sound and video will be restricted during the presentations. If you do have any practical questions, though, regarding sound, video, etc., you can please ask those questions in the chat and a member of the WISE staff will respond to you. You can also ask questions for the presenters, written questions during the presentations if you use the Q&A function that you see highlighted on the diagram to the right. Delegate sound and video will be unlocked for the Q&A and you're really welcome to turn your video on, but please don't unmute yourself until you're actually invited to ask your question. Once your video has been enabled, if you can't see yourself, please turn your camera off and then turn it back on again. Just what all IT people tell us. If it doesn't work, switch it off and switch it back on, and that generally fixes it. Please do raise your hand when you want to ask a question verbally in the Q&A session itself. Next slide, please. So the usual Chatham House rules apply. We won't be attributing quotes to anybody without requesting permission first. Once the breakout sessions are opened, delegates will be automatically allocated into a room by my team. A 5-minute warning will be given before the breakout rooms are closed, letting you know that you're going to be returning to the main session. And the webinar will be recorded and shared in the members area of the WISE website. Next slide, please. So, as I'm sure all of you know, okay, at WISE, our vision is gender balance in STEM. And as such, our products and services are designed to help you drive diversity, equity and inclusion in your organisations. So much of the work that we do with all of you is via our flagship 10 Steps framework. And that's what we're gathered here to discuss today. The annual Measuring Progress event has taken place every year since this framework was launched back in 2014. And it provides an excellent opportunity to assess and discuss members' progress. The diagnostic itself provides a snapshot around the work being done in your organisations to address gender balance. And this can be very useful for members wanting to know how their specific EDI initiatives have been received, or indeed how well their communications around these have been disseminated to everyone in the organisation. The 10 Steps diagnostic is flexible and it can assimilate feedback from only a few or from many stakeholders within an organisation. And as we'll see when Jack shares the results, some of our signatories are sharing the diagnostic more widely than they have in the past to gain insights into staff sentiment across the organisations rather than just have one specific team fill it in. I'd like to really thank those that have submitted their data ahead of this event. It demonstrates considerable commitment and it will help to inform and accelerate your D&I journey moving forwards. I'd also like to give a special thanks to those organisations that have submitted their data over several years, because this provides us here at WISE with considerable evidence regarding the efficacy of 10 Steps, and it lets us know where there might be areas for continuous improvement to make things even better moving forward. So one of the key aims of this event, in addition to it being an opportunity to gauge your organisation's progress, and you can compare how you did this year to how you did last year, etc., it's also an opportunity to facilitate networking opportunities and the sharing of best practices between members. So I'd really encourage you to please do take advantage of this in the breakout rooms later. I'm going to be handing over to our expert speakers shortly, and I'll just tell you a little about who we have speaking with us today. So first we have Jack Painter, who is the WISE Diversity Inclusion Lead, and Jack will begin the event with an analysis of the results from this year. Then we are joined by Abby Frost and Barry Cowell from WSP and Mickey Nicholas from Northumbrian Water Group. And all of those colleagues will share presentations on their 10 steps journeys. And then last but by no means least, we have Andrea McFarlane joining us from AWE, and Andrea will conclude the presentations with insights into the way AWE has accommodated other elements of diversity into its employment practices. And just before I do hand over to Jack, I think it's important to mention here that although the 10 steps framework was created initially to improve gender balance within STEM, and it's still heavily used for that today, it also increases diversity and inclusion more generally, as it encourages employers to address bias, to recognise the benefits of difference, and create fair practices around recruitment, progression, retention and promotion. I hope that you find today's event useful, and I'm now going to leave you in Jack's very capable hands. Thank you, Jack.
Thanks, Kate. Good morning, everyone. As Kate said, my name is Jack Painter. I'm the Diversity and Inclusion Lead at WISE, and this morning I'm going to be taking you through the results of this year's diagnostic. So let's start by looking at the overall 10-step scores for this year. This is the average step score for the 20 organisations that took part in this year's benchmarking event. This year, Change Mindsets by Challenging Bias and Sexism was our highest scoring step. This was the second highest scoring step the previous 2 years, and it's now actually moved into the top spot. And the step score has actually increased by 0.39 points from last year. The continued improvement in this step is a really positive legacy of the increased focus on diversity and inclusion following events such as the tragic deaths of George Floyd and Sarah Everard. Change Mindsets isn't the only step to see an increase from 2021. 5 other steps saw their score increase from last year, with 1 further step maintaining the same score. Of those 6 steps that saw their scores increase, 5 of them are recovering from a slump in 2021. However, 1 step that hasn't recovered from its 2021 slump is making flexible working a reality for all. This was actually our highest scoring step in 2020 after the move to remote working during COVID, but has since dropped off heavily and continues to fall, though more slowly now. This is likely due to some employers putting some pressure on their employees to return to the workplace and removing that previously widely available access to flexible working. Where the Changing Mindset step has been a positive legacy of that increased focus on diversity and inclusion, and one that we hope goes from strength to strength in years to come, the improved attitudes and access to flexible working that we saw during the COVID pandemic seems to be waning and could be an area of focus for organisations moving forward. At the other end of the spectrum, increased transparency of opportunities for progression had recently been our consistently lowest scoring step, but it's actually jumped 2 places to 8th this year. And the previously lowest scoring question of do you have gender balanced promotion boards or gender balanced job panels saw an approximately 15% increase in score this year. It's still pretty low scoring at 0.82 out of 2 for the question, but a great improvement. Proactively engaging men and women to encourage them to consider promotion opportunities and proactively engaging men and women to encourage them to consider promotion opportunities, internal job application processes, and special project opportunities being transparent to all also saw positive jumps forward. On the less positive side of things, sponsor female talent to the same extent as male talent has seen a continuous decline in score over the previous 3 years, and it's actually now our lowest scoring step. The question around women identified in your talent pool receiving mentoring or sponsorship saw the single biggest drop in score, 0.45, or a 30% drop on the 2021 score. We'll be looking at this step and that question in more detail in your breakout rooms. It'll be really good to hear that testimony on potential issues at your organisations and also have the chance to explore some best practice examples from others. So here's the full list of our lowest scoring questions, and these 7 questions all scored lower than 1 overall, which is the medium score you can get on a question. I've put an asterisk next to two of the questions, one of which we've just spoken about. These are low scoring steps that have actually seen good increases this year, and in both cases have improved year on year from 2020 as well. They're still low scores, but they're moving in the right direction. The other questions that we've got on screen are both low scoring and they're either stagnating or they're moving in the wrong direction. And so they'll need more careful attention. And this is why they'll be featured as discussion points in your breakout rooms later on today. So this graph here shows the average signatory score each year from 2016 through to this year. There are certain signatories that complete the diagnostic every year and then some that do it sporadically. So just a caveat to say that this isn't consistently the same signatories every year. Instead, it's a graph of the average score for each year overall. And we can see an overall continuous upward trend, which is great. And it really takes whole-scale signatory improvement to move that average up each year. And it demonstrates the really good work being done by our members and, as Kay touched on, the efficacy and the value of the 10 steps benchmarking activity. In 2022, the signatory score is recovering after a dip in 2021. And that's most likely due to the ongoing impacts of COVID on the gender equality agenda in organisations. So as we mentioned, not all the same signatories have completed the diagnostic year on year. And this is going to be a really big focus of ours moving forward because we want to empirically show that efficacy and value of the 10 steps and specifically this benchmarking exercise. Of the 20 signatories who took part in the benchmarking this year, 11 also completed the diagnostic last year. And if we just look at those members, we see the average signatory score has increased by 7% from last year, with 8 of those 11 organisations improving their score overall. This is a small but really good first step, and we want at least those 11 companies to complete the diagnostic again next year. But really, our goal is to get all 20 organisations who complete the diagnostic this year to take part again next year. And this has twofold benefits, one being that it's great for you as members for tracking your progress against your diversity inclusion strategies and the goals and the objectives you set in relation to the scores that you get, but it also helps give us that empirical evidence that'll support the great work and value that we really know the 10 steps framework provides. And finally, possibly the most striking insight from this year's diagnostic was the disparity between scores from organisations who show the diagnostic widely and those that had one or a couple of representatives complete it on behalf of the company. The graph shows the relationship between diagnostic score and the number of diagnostics completed by an organisation. We can see that aside from a couple of notable exceptions, the highest diagnostic scores were attained by organisations that had one representative complete it on their behalf. And those organisations that submitted one diagnostic might have done some internal collation, and if they have, we'd be unaware of that. But in general, the relationship is very clear. And we believe there are two main reasons for this. The representative completing it on behalf of a whole organisation will be either a HR professional or a diversity inclusion professional, and they'll have visibility of the whole diversity inclusion agenda at that organisation. So they'll be aware of all the initiatives and policies that are in place that are relevant to the 10 steps. More general, if you share it more widely, general employees might not be aware of these, and they might answer no or don't know when actually a HR or D&I professional would know that actually those policies or initiatives are in place. And this leads into that second reason, which is that when you have that sort of one professional or a couple of representatives complete the diagnostic, it's more of a factual exercise. And when you have employees that are completing it, it's an exercise looking at their perception and awareness of gender diversity initiatives that's being assessed, as much as their presence in the organisation. And this is equally important. And that brings us to the end of the analysis for the diagnostic this year. And I believe next we've got breakout sessions to discuss some of our successes and our challenges that we've seen from our members this year.
Thank you for that, Jack. Some interesting food for thought. So as I said earlier, we'll now automatically move into the first breakout sessions. Thank you.
Hi, Jonathan. Can you hear me? You should be able to turn your sound and microphone on now. We've just started the breakout sessions, and I'm just going to try and allocate you to one of those. I won't be a minute. Hi, Jonathan. Can you hear me? Just wondering if you're able to turn your sound on. Hello.
Hello.
Are you in one of the breakout sessions?
Yeah, I was on my iPad. I was trying to transfer onto my laptop, and it's just sent me back here.
Oh, okay.
I was in group 9, I think. Not group 9, group 3, was it?
Three. I've just been trying to get you back into it. For some reason, it won't let me put you back in. I'm not sure why. Do you think would you be able to leave and try and join again? It might.
Right. So I'll come out.
Thank you.
Oh yeah.
Hello. You're still with me, unfortunately. I'm just going to have a little play around and see if I can try and get you back into the session. I'm so sorry about this.
No, it's not your fault. No, it's probably, well, I mean, I was on my iPad, I was in the other room, and then I thought, right, I'm going to sit the breakout session. I need to do more than listen, so I need to sit at my desk again. And I tried to open it up on here, and it just sent me to you. Sorry.
I think that might have. So it says that you're in the meeting.
No, it's not. It's closed now, my iPad. So.
Are you able to leave from that one and rejoin using the link on your other one? It might just still be registering you.
Right, I've just checked. It's not. So come off here and leave. Try again.
I think it's the other one that's still registering you as being in the.
I've closed it off now. I've turned it off. I powered it off, so I can't be on there anymore.
Let me see. I'm asking you to join.
Oh,
are
thank
you
you.
all right? You got it.
Think so.
Perfect. Lovely. Sorry about that. Good morning, Alan. Hello. We've gone into the breakout sessions now. I'm just going to go try and assign you to one of the breakout sessions. I won't be a minute. I'll just enable your sound microphone. Hopefully you should be being called into the meeting now. You should be able to join. Hi, Alan. You should be able to turn your sound and microphone on now.
Yeah, sorry, I've
hello.
joined on a different device because the video wasn't working on that one. So I'm hoping my camera is working on this one, which it is.
Oh, it is perfect. I'm just going to try and get you back into your group.
Thank you.
You were in group 1, weren't you? Sorry
I
about
was.
this.
Thank you. No, it's fine. My fault. My computer's playing up.
Right, so you should get some kind of alert that calls you into the meeting.
Yes, but it's actually doing it on my other computer, not on my laptop, which is slightly strange. I don't know why that's happening actually. Because I've shut down Teams on my desktop, but it's still coming through on the desktop. Let me just shut that down. Let me just shut that down. I've left everything on that one, so I'm actually going to shut my computer down. One sec. So I should still be joined on this one, right? So the downside of having trying to use 2 devices.
Yeah. Technology, hey.
Well, I just felt I was the only one that wasn't have the video on, so I felt a bit right. Let's just shut that down. There's one that can you try and ask me in again?
Yes, I will.
Sorry.
We might need to log you out and back in again, because it might still just be registering that computer. You getting any alert on this one now?
No. Let me leave and rejoin on this one.
That would be great, and then we'll try again. Sorry. Hi, Alan. Can you hear me again?
Hello. I can.
Hello there. Let's try that again.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Any alerts?
No.
No. Let me try one more. Are you using the same email address? Or a different one?
No, same one.
Okay. Let me.
Fortunately, I've got there's a colleague in the meeting as well, so if I'll reboot my desktop and try and get in without video next time.
I'm going to change you to a different group and see whether that makes a difference. They're all the same. It just
No, that's
means
fine.
that hopefully I can get you into one of them.
It might think I'm already in one, so
It could be that, yeah. It's saying it's assigning you. Doing that spinny whirly thing. No, that's not worked, has it? Oh, I'm really sorry about this.
That's all right. Well, what I'll do is I'll go back in and on the main one, on the main desktop, and then just not have video for the day. It's absolutely fine. Don't worry.
Sorry about that.
That's absolutely fine. Just
sometimes if you toggle it on and off, it can rejig it as well.
Can I ask you a favour? Can you let group one know I haven't been rude? I'm actually I'm coming back.
Okay, will do.
Thanks, Hannah. Appreciate it. Cheers.
Thanks. Speak to you soon. Bye. Hi, Alan.
Hello.
Hello. You've still not getting into the room.
Ah, I've just this minute rejoined. So have you tried to allocate me?
Okay, I'll try and allocate you now.
Thank you.
Let's see if that
I might make it in time for the summary. Aha.
you got a call into the meeting. Excellent. Did you not manage to get in?
I did, but then I came out again. Hang on. I was in and then out again.
That's very odd. Let me try again. Oh, no, I can't ask you to join. That's very weird.
It maybe thinks I'm already there.
I think it might.
Hang on. Let's see what.
Sorry, would you mind logging out again and coming in? I think that might because at the moment you.
Oh, hang on. I'm on hold in the room. I'm all right. I'm there.
Oh, okay.
think Irene got to that first.
Are we in the main room or?
Yeah, we're in the main room now.
Oh,
So all
okay.
of our lovely breakout participants are back on muted and off camera. Properly. We're going for a break now, actually, aren't we? Or should we? I think we're all going for a break now until 12 o'clock. So feel free to go and enjoy 10 minutes of your own time.
Hannah, are we ready to go?
Yeah, we're all ready to go now, Kay.
Okay, so I'd just like to welcome everybody back from the breakout session. Certainly the room that I was in, there was some very interesting conversation. I now have the pleasure of introducing our first two expert speakers, both from WSP, who would have been our hosts today had this been in person. So I was going to say, next slide, please. Thank you. So firstly, we have Abby Frost, and Abby is the UK I&D manager at WSP. Abby manages the implementation of WSP's inclusion and diversity strategy across the business. Abby is passionate about realising WSP's ambition to be recognised as an inclusive employer who celebrates difference and empowers its employees to challenge behaviours that don't fit with the WSP culture. And Abby makes sure that this is applied across day-to-day business interactions every day and throughout project delivery, etc., where Abby also works alongside the WSP project teams to ensure they achieve operational inclusion and diversity objectives for their clients. Also joining Abby to share their 10 steps journey is Barry Cowell. So welcome, Barry. Barry is Head of Discipline for Earth and Environment at WSP, and he also chairs the UK Gender Committee. Barry has spent over 20 years in WSP, living and working across the world, building relationships and continually learning about how to do things better. Barry believes in treating everyone as you wish to be treated, being honest, open and fair, and creating a sense of purpose within the teams he works in is crucial. It's on this basis that Barry chose to get involved and support the D&I strategy for WSP UK. Over to you both. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kay, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. As Kay said, I am Abby Frost, and I am the Inclusion and Diversity Manager at WSP. Great, thanks, Hannah. So for those of you unfamiliar with WSP, we're a global multidisciplinary professional services and engineering organisation. We're also FTSE registered, and in the UK, we now have around 9,000 staff in over 55 offices across the regions. And around 31% of our workforce is female, and around 25% of our middle and senior leaders are female as well, which is an increase of about 6% over the last 3 years. So today, Barry and I are sharing how the WISE 10 Steps framework has helped to shape the actions along our D&I journey, from approaching workforce and gender balance as a business improvement project to some of our more challenging areas of changing mindsets, using menopause and neurodiversity as 2 examples, and then we'll have time for a Q&A. If I could have the next slide, please. Thank you. So just to start by setting the scene, WSP have been signatories to the WISE 10 Steps since 2015. Back then, there weren't that many inclusion and EDI frameworks available, and so we used the 10 Steps to guide as a guideline to support us in identifying our routes to change within our organisation. And since then, there have been many actions WSP has taken to align with those 10 steps, but unfortunately time won't allow us to cover all today. Therefore, we've chosen to focus on the themes of the 10 steps and how more broadly they've formed our approach to driving D&I and cultural change across our business. And you can see here our latest score using the WISE Diagnostics tool. And looking at this, we've chosen to share with you how we've approached our I&D journey as a business improvement project, an area that we've scored relatively highly in. And we'll also be discussing changing mindsets, an area we're still working on as reflected in our diagnostic score, but that we recognise is really key for actioning change. We recognise it's one of our biggest challenges, but also an area that we know is starting to show a real demonstrable shift from where we started out. And as we get into our discussion, you'll also see that each of the 10 steps isn't standalone. For example, sharing learning and best practice threads throughout our actions, from educating our leaders and giving them accountability for change across the business to moving to a position where we can guide our clients and use our knowledge to inform decision making to make our designs and services more inclusive for all. And as we discuss these topics, you'll also see there are many interactions, as I've already mentioned, that we find best work when viewed alongside other areas of the framework. Next slide, please. And So as with any area of business improvement, when we set out on our journey towards a more balanced workforce, we knew we needed to be clear of what we wanted to achieve. And then we needed to set out the steps that we need to take to get there, and set out how we want to communicate that back with our colleagues, back with the business, so that everybody knows the direction that we are taking our business in, and importantly, the culture that we want to create. So in January last year, WSP strengthened its commitment to I&D through launching its first 3-year inclusion and diversity strategy. It's sponsored from the top from our CEO, Mark Naismith, and like any business improvement project, aligns with our wider business strategy. Creating an inclusive workforce is a priority for us at WSP, where we want everybody in the business to feel both valued as individuals and for the contributions that they make to the teams that we work in. And an integral part of our approach is belonging at WSP, and that's making sure that whatever our similarities are and our differences are, and whatever our backgrounds, we can all bring our whole selves to work to celebrate those differences. And to encapsulate this, the strategy sets out our ambition statement, and that is that WSP is recognised by our staff, peers, and our clients as a safe, inclusive workplace where staff are authentic and they can challenge behaviours that don't support our inclusive culture. And as you can see, the second half of this slide, we have 3 key areas within our strategy and the accompanying action plan, across which the 10-step themes are reflected. So the first one is understanding our baseline and helping us to identify where we need to take action. And this means looking at the diversity of our workforce, really drilling down into that in a meaningful way to help us to plan those actions to create that balanced workforce. So, for example, looking at the proportion of our roles held by women, or the number of colleagues at different grades from different ethnicities or backgrounds. The second focus area is about providing equity of opportunities for our colleagues. So making sure everyone has fair access to opportunities to develop their career and realise their aspirations. Making sure our policies are inclusive, so from parental leave for same-sex couples to shared parental leave, and our transitioning at work guidance for colleagues undergoing gender reassignment. And how we recruit is also an important part of that strategy. So making sure we reach a diverse candidate pool and can remove bias from our selection processes. And then the third focus area is all around developing our colleagues. So as I've already mentioned, changing mindsets is key. And so this third priority area is about enabling everybody to talk confidently about I&D so that we can all promote the culture that we want to work in. And that's not only amongst our colleagues, as I've mentioned, but also with our partners, clients and suppliers. We also use other benchmarking tools, for example, the Stonewall WEI and Disability Confidence Scheme, to make sure that our wider business processes and processes are inclusive of all employees. Creating a balanced workforce, as I've already mentioned, can't be achieved by looking at a single characteristic in isolation, and it does require a broader view, identifying those intersections with other characteristics and groups of colleagues, and making sure that our workplace does provide those equitable opportunities for everyone. And it requires buy-in from our leadership teams and wider support from across the business, and that's what our strategy sets out to do. Next slide, please. So with this in mind, the implementation of our inclusion and development strategy is supported by our I&D committee. You can see the broad outline at the top of the slide there. And this committee reflects how we will deliver and drive the changes to our I&D programme, with representatives from across each of the core functions of our business, including our employee resource groups, so our LGBTQ+ group Vibe, our race and ethnicity group CREED. We've also got the chair of our gender balance group and menopause hub, and then we have representatives from core functions including marketing and comms, HR, and then our 5 strategic business units. And the I&D committee importantly forms 2 core functions. Firstly, supporting the implementation of the strategy through bringing each of those business areas directly into conversation, and also by setting up dedicated inclusion and diversity forums within each of our core strategic business units. And they each have been given the opportunity to develop a tailored action plan to promote I&D for each specific area of the business. And then the second core function of the committee is to provide that conduit for colleagues to engage with and be heard by our senior leadership team. And again, that allows them to also be heard through the I&D forums and the ERGs. And as I say, that's really key for us at WSP. By building that culture of inclusion, we know that everybody needs to be engaged. And therefore, in addition to those routes of communication, we have a number of other ways and mechanisms that we measure and improve our EDI performance and communicate this out. So to bring this back to the business improvement plan and monitoring progress, we also have a new Power BI People dashboard, and that gives us up-to-the-minute data around our workforce diversity for every part of the business. And that really helps us to continually review our status and our progress and continue to identify focus for action. And again, allows us to update those action plans. I've already mentioned that we use external benchmarking and accreditation schemes as well, and that allows us to gauge our EDI performance against our sector. But we also want to know how our colleagues are feeling and to get their feedback and suggestions too. And for this, we use a Peakon survey, and this is an employee survey shared every 6 months with a specific focus on engagement and inclusion and diversity. And you can see here that survey has 3 sub-drivers, so diversity, inclusiveness and non-discrimination. The survey is completely anonymised, and alongside those questions, there's opportunity for everybody to share their comments, their feedback and their suggestions with the business. It gives us really important insight to how our employees are perceiving our actions and perceiving our performance, and an opportunity, importantly as well, to feed back to them directly. We can also benchmark ourselves against other professional services organisations as well. Again, to provide further opportunities to share back progress and to drive that two-way communication with our leadership team, we hold speakeasies through the year in each of our offices. And through those discussions, an example of where we've been able to make a really positive change is to update our bank holiday policy, whereby through discussions at the speakeasies, we understand that traditional bank holidays don't suit everybody in our business. And so we can now allow all colleagues to bank those days and you take them at a future point where that might suit them better. We also use the Let's Talk About series, which has an internal focus on people's experience and our colleagues' experience, and we bring them together to share those through different events, and topics which they have discussed so far include the menopause and grief. And we also use our external speakers to come in and share their experiences. And last year we started our inspirational speakers event. And this brings together people in a range of I&D related topics. Just recently we had Joe Marler and previously Ruby Wax talking about their mental health journeys, and June Sapong's also come in to talk about how understanding and challenging exclusion in the workplace. And so by using all those different channels to engage with our colleagues alongside that people dashboard for looking at workforce diversity, we're able to measure our performance, communicate with our progress and respond to feedback from colleagues, all of which informs our review and update of that strategy and action plan to help us with building our culture of inclusion. Over to you, Barry.
Thank you, Abby. We've just already changed it. Thank you. So I really start with a statement which is, I love my job. I get the opportunity to meet some wonderful people, to collaborate and converse with them. We have so many wonderful people in WSP, in our supply chain, our peer group, our colleagues, and all of you today. For the next 10 minutes, I can't take credit at all for the work I'm about to present. But as any good consultant will tell you, I'll get my caveats in early, and that is we are on a journey. Don't assume that we have got all of this right, but alongside yourselves, our staff, our colleagues and clients, we will do our utmost to provide meaningful change on that journey. So I'm going to cover 2 lived-in examples that we are currently engaged in, using, by and large, the I&D strategy we have adopted, the guidelines of the 10 steps within that. They're focused on changing mindsets and retaining and developing our staff. Next slide, please. First area I want to cover on the changing mindsets and supporting retention and development is the topic of menopause. Nearly 1 in 3 women are considering reducing their hours or leaving work because of menopause symptoms. Yes, that is indeed, if you work it out, 33%. It's traditionally a taboo topic. It's stigmatized, it's misunderstood and unsupported. And we've taken the opportunity to make a difference by listening to our staff, And that is a really important statement I want to make. This was not a top-down business decision. It was a great example of a staff idea creating initial momentum for change. I would probably argue that that's the way all of the best ideas develop. So how did we address this important issue, and how are we addressing it within WSP? Around 3 key topic areas to talk about it, and a little bit more on that shortly. Creating a safe space, the Menopause Group and Menopause Hub, and educating the business as much as we can. So the Let's Talk About series, Abby has touched on it previously. It's been traditionally seen, that is the menopause, as a private matter, a woman's issue, and it has really made it harder for people to discuss it openly. According to recent studies, only 22% of employees have spoken out about menopause in their workplace. That's a disappointing statistics, but it's really important. So the Let's Talk About series is a set of inclusion conversations around certain topics that need discussing. The topics are really gritty, they're awkward, they're uncomfortable, and often the cause of limited discussions to date. What does it enable? Well, first and foremost, to have that open discussion, to build people's confidence, and to learn from others, be inspired, and have a sense of belonging. Next slide, please. To create that safe space, we formed the Menopause Group. It was initially formulated offline, but now we're having meetup sessions with 50 to 100 colleagues attending and discussing the impacts of the menopause. It's been overwhelmingly positive in that it's brought significant relief for individuals to talk and share their experiences. To support and run in parallel, we have created the Menopause Hub. It's arguably a SharePoint, but gives a safe, stigma-free space where people can ask questions and provide, and indeed receive information, guidance and support. From these discussions, we have formulated certain key themes. Of course, I've touched on this, the need to talk and connect with like-minded individuals. Concerns and worry around bias, that WSP or others would employ only young women and female colleagues, but also understanding one of the collective frustrations around a passive voice. Let me know if I can do anything for you versus the active voice. Let's talk about what's happening. Here are the resources and this is the support we can provide. This has informed a discussion around how we educate our staff, and some on the screen at the moment illustrate this. Education sheets with relatable scenarios, demystifying jargon for line managers and for the staff to counter the lack of awareness or terminology. Messaging around ageism, the menopause itself, and highlighting the need for courage. And a really innovative approach, again found by one of our staff, was to bring forward some of the retirement advice for those from our ongoing pension provider, for those who might be considering as a consequence of the menopause. So for me, the greatest outcome, or the best outcome for this so far, has been that we have stopped individuals leaving the business as a consequence of this activity, but it's also enabled the business to not only interface, but provide bespoke interventions as we go forward. Next up, slide, please. The second area I wish to cover is neurodiversity. But just a point of clarification around this, when I speak about the term, I mean it in its broadest sense. I appreciate there is a lot of many other conditions that could be included, but I just wanted to make everyone clear on that topic. And this has been and is a very emerging journey for WSP, because it's reflecting not only within the business and how we can promote neurodivergence, but also within the external part of our activities. So it's estimated that 15% of people in the UK are neurodivergent. I would suggest that's a lower estimate. 22%, for example, are defined as disabled, which is about 14 million people. When you compare 15% to that, it's 11 million people in the UK. It's often underdiagnosed and often late in that diagnosis. It is a real and truly intersectional issue, and it's a constantly emerging area. We certainly do not have all of the answers. Hence our share of practice to stimulate debate and discussion within this workshop today. So as I mentioned, it is an approach that covers both our internal WSP staff, but more broadly our projects, the infrastructure, our clients and the public at large. And we think it's a great start to the debate. Given the 10 million people affected, designing for the mind is now fundamental. There's been great progress, as I'm sure you're aware, around designing for accessibility requirements for disability. They're now embedded in standard and design codes in engineering and placemaking, but they don't exist in the same way for neurodivergence. It's nascent at best, and WSP wants to change this with your help. So we asked ourselves, what can we do as designers and placemakers? We have a unique opportunity to influence the built environment, our clients' decisions, stimulate policy decisions, and develop designs without barriers. So how can we help the conversation move forward? Next slide, please. WSP has a global sustainability program called Future Ready, which focuses on our future needs of society and how it will affect us as we move forward. We decided to undertake some primary research as part of that and write a white paper aimed at promoting the importance of designing for the mind, which can be shared with our clients and on LinkedIn and hopefully everywhere. Note, it is still in approval stage to a degree, and therefore it isn't quite available to all. So WSP is a complex and large organization. We've interviewed people who consider themselves neurodiverse to better understand their experience and the barriers they face, what they find hard, and we've used those findings to produce simple principles that help the design consider mental health and neurodiversity in their work. We've created personas that represent a cross-section of experience and barriers that people can face, and they're on the slide now. And our personas aim to bring these experiences to life, to explore potential solutions in design. May not reflect everybody, but rather intend to highlight commonalities in experience. And the learning that we have taken from this research is interventions in two ways: the principles and, of course, interventions. And next slide, please. The principles are really high-level design themes, and we have used the acronym RECAP, and they're arguably things that are included in design for outcome-based activities around placemaking. Design interventions are ideas, but they cannot be considered for everyone. Quiet, natural, intuitive, accessible. Absolutely understand that not all divergence will receive a benefit from those interventions. It is just providing respective themes. Next slide, please. So where has this been put into practice? This is a real and ongoing project. It is part of Old Oak Common Station, London's soon to be interchange for HS2. We've been working now on the scheme design for almost 2 years with a huge focus on accessibility and inclusivity. We've brought our own team to review and identify neurodivergent requirements, people who are autistic, had visual impairment, carers for disabled people, etc. And some of the interventions used on this scheme were quiet refuge zones, created along all routes and spaces within the urban realm. Nature, using natural form and elements through the design, extensive planting, which provide additional sensory benefits, open spaces flooded with light, intuitive design. We have designed routes and design layouts, making it support clearly views towards key landmarks such as station entrance and other. Many of this is congruent with good urban and placemaking design, but it is with a slant towards not only disability, but neurodivergence. We had the design reviewed by a gentleman called Steve Maslin. He was on the design team review. And if you don't know Steve, he's written a book on neurodivergence, and I would actually kindly request that you have a read of it. And subsequent to all of this design work that we've done over the 2 years, it's been shortlisted for an award, and we're really pleased about that. So what we have to do now is embed that thinking within WSP as a whole, within our clients, some of whom are hugely supportive of us, and drive this through the rest of the opportunity that not only our staff are asking for, but our clients and the public desperately need. Next slide, please. So lessons learned from our journey with the I&D
Sorry,
strategy.
Barry, I think it needs to go on one more.
Oh, beg your pardon, one more. Just check where we are. Yep, that's correct. So some very quick takeaways from myself and Abby. Make it real, get people involved. What I heard in the previous workshop was exactly that. Except you don't have all the answers. There's intersectionality within everything. And last but not least, don't always focus on the biggest improvement areas first, as it may not provide you with the biggest challenge. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for listening, and thanks to WISE for giving us this opportunity to present to you today. I'll now open for Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you both. There were some really concerning statistics shared there, but I'm both impressed and inspired by everything that's being done at WSP. And I do want to tell you both, in all of my years in pharma, in contracting lots of engineering companies, whether it was a new build or remediation or anything like that, the first female engineers that ever came onto any of my sites came from WSP. So I just did want to give you that shout out there. Okay, so thank you. I won't take the time now. Let me just ask my team, are there any actual questions that were put in the Q&A chat for us to start with?
Yeah, I have one here. Think there's one here. Have you had any negative pushback from managers around the menopause work? And if so, how did you handle this?
I think this is not trying to present a rose-tinted view, but my general sentiment is that it has been universally accepted as a positive within the business. Abby, I'm not sure if you've heard any different to that.
To be honest, all I've heard is really positive feedback, and more than anything, it's generated discussion amongst a lot of different people, not just women, also our male colleagues, and I think that's against a cross sector of our business as well, across different age profiles. So as it's a real testament to Chantel, who set it up, and how that network has grown from a very small group of people to now having over, as Barry said, around 150 people join that network.
You're correct, Abby, and that's a point I wanted to raise. By virtue of these discussions, it's actually raised not only the awareness of the menopause, but also of the corresponding male menopause. So some of those discussions I've heard emanating in the business have started, and I'd never have heard those before this group was set up. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Sumaya, any other questions in the chat?
Yes, there's another one. How do you balance neurodiversity with the client if it generates additional costs? How do you get their buy-in?
Like all clients, I think it's a conversation. Ultimately, we are working with clients who are going to be hard pushed, but their design requirements and all of their employees' requirements to begin with traditionally are about people using large infrastructure for their daily lives. So the outcome of particularly large-scale infrastructure projects needs to be fit for the proverbial purpose. So when and if we've engaged on this, and I have to say it's been relatively modest so far, it has been arguably on the basis that for this to be the best destination, the best place, and get the best use out of the original concept, this has to be included within your design parameters. It will make it much more usable, much more beneficial, and much more rewarding. There is, of course, the other strand, that is good design should be ultimately not be cost-based, but if you get in early enough, you can design the cost within it, but everyone has a price point. So there are and will continue to be clients who will not and do not see neurodivergence as a requirement until law is passed that it needs to be. And unfortunately, that is the present position we are in. So I think I haven't got a unique answer for that other than early engagement, early discussion, budgetary discussions, and outcome focused, but also trying to, on occasion, pick the right client works. I think we probably all know who the wrong clients might be, but there are certainly some, I would say, clients who are far-sighted, who understand that being developmental in their perception of what good design looks like and delivering on it will reap the rewards in the long term of the project. Forgive me if that was a bit of a bookshot answer, but it is absolutely the right part of a discussion to have.
Thank you, Barry. Sumaya, any others?
Yes, we have one more. Any examples of your actions around menopause you would describe as best and quick winners?
I think I mentioned it in the presentation. This was a staff initiative. It emanated from an idea, a need, and that was the one that really stood out for me. So if you look at it in terms of what has been the biggest action that people have recognized is the ability to offload, the ability to share experiences, the ability just to have an open discussion. So that would be probably my biggest takeaway. Abby, I don't know if you want to supplement that or not.
Yeah, no, I can build on that. I think it's also giving those people a voice to share those experiences, and we've found that by doing that, that's what's moved those conversations forward. And I think, as Barry said, it's just getting that buy-in from your leadership team, which was a very quick win. Here we have the buy-in already through the D&I committee. So to bring that new idea to the table was a quick win, and then we've just taken it and grown it from there.
Thank you both. So may we have time for one more question?
Okay, there are a few more questions, but I'll just ask one. Could you provide the title and author of the book reference on neurodivergence in the chat, please?
Not a problem at all.
So Sumaya, because that was a really quick one, we'll allow one more.
What changes have you made to your recruitment practices to support neurodivergent candidates?
You want me to take this one, Barry?
Please.
So WSP, as I already mentioned, is part of the Disability Confidence Scheme, and we have a Disability Confident Leader Level 3. So within that scheme, we now ask at that point of shortlist or invitation to interview what adjustments might be needed. Of course, as with anything, that neurodivergence is a protected characteristic, so we allow people to share that information if they need to, but just try and also educate our hiring managers around that conversation. It's now we have training that we give to all our line managers around unconscious bias and inclusive hiring. And so that's embedded and will be further embedded as we move further into our D&I journey. But it's generally educating, I think, our hiring anybody with hiring responsibilities to be able to have those conversations and make sure that we've got accessible means to hold those interviews as well.
Okay, thank you both. I'm really sorry, but to be respectful of everybody's time, we have to keep to schedule, okay? So maybe if you're on the breakout sessions this afternoon with Abby and Barry, you could maybe ask some of the additional questions that are left over. So now I would like to introduce our next expert speaker, and that is Mickey Nicholas, MBE. So Mickey is the D&I manager at Northumbrian Water Group. Welcome, Mickey. Mickey was born in the East End of London a long time ago, and I did check with Mickey at the beginning of this if I was allowed to say that, and he said yes. Okay, so Mickey joined Northumbrian Water in 2020 and brought with him varied and broad diverse career background. So notably, Mickey was the first non-white union executive for the Fire Brigade Union, so a TUC Race Relations Committee member. Mickey has worked with the Home Office and the DCLG to bring changes to the National Fire Service recruitment and selection processes to really encourage diversity. Mickey was elected as a Labour councillor in Newham, East London, 2004 to 2014, and Mickey also received an MBE for his services to the Fire and Rescue Service and the London community in June 2017. Welcome, Mickey, and I'll hand over to you.
Oh, thank you. Good afternoon, Kay, and good afternoon to everyone. It's great to be here, and you know, like a lot of other people, I was quite looking forward to going back to my city of birth, to London, until, of course, the industrial dispute, not the industrial dispute, changed everything for everyone. Like Kay said, I spent a long time, most of my career, in the fire service and in the trade union movement, and picked up D&I primarily because of my lived and work experience in the fire service and in other organisations. So when I did retire in 2018, I meant to totally retire, and was thoroughly enjoying a retirement in the northeast of England. And then COVID turned up, and I decided that my domestic responsibilities and my parental responsibilities were becoming far too much. And so in 2020, in August 2020, I landed at Northumbrian Water. When I talk about on a journey, the first thing to say is that, like the rest of the water industry, diversity wasn't at the top of anyone's list. It certainly wasn't planned or measured. There was some attempts at some type of diversity, probably in the last 10 years, but diversity wasn't a big thing, in my opinion, for the water industry per se. Should we say that they were playing at it? And I'll be honest with you and say that my company was no different to that. So we're definitely on a journey. These things I want to talk about: the beginning, the changing times, the work in progress, but most importantly, the work that we still have to do. Cheers, Hannah. Next slide. In the beginning, next slide. Thank you. So as I said at the top there, historically, poor diversity data, not having a system, and we're hoping to change that next year, that even collects personal data or data around personal characteristics. Few, if any, partnerships and affiliations in the diversity space, something that's fundamentally important for an industry that, as I say, has no footprint. No structure to any D&I progression, limited management development, understanding and skills on D&I. We had no colleague voice at all. We had some policies. They weren't necessarily, I would say, D&I centric. We certainly had no strategy for delivery. And our leadership was predominantly white, male, middle-aged. There was some gender balance. In fact, our leadership team are nearly 50% women, white women, and again, middle-aged. The water industry per se is predominantly structured like that from a leadership perspective. And of course, right throughout the water industry, I often call it a white middle-aged industry. And there's so much to do there, especially when we start to talk about gender balance as well. Next slide, please. So one of the first things they did prior to me joining, they appointed a new HR director, someone with a background of change and certainly diversity and changing for diversity. And the first thing that she did was restructure our HR team. One of the things that she recognised when she first joined, that actually the very people who tend to implement change in our organisation needed to change themselves. And one of the first things she brought about was a commitment from the leadership to a people experience framework, because that is where she saw that our business was needed to be very, very quickly brought up to speed. We needed to have a part of HR that was extremely and totally focused on the people experience and colleague experience. Because of that direction, I dare say they had a bit of a churn, and I became, alongside quite a few other people in HR, one of the new voices. People brought in primarily because of their experiences in other industries, especially around diversity and people voice and people experience and colleague support as well. And alongside that, we then had our very first people experience and strategy team. And I said joined in 2020 along with other people, and we started to have what we call specialist roles within that people team as well. We had our first ever review of all our D&I policies, and when we've now moved on from is not so much policies as well, but also guidelines for managers around D&I. And like everything else in our industry, definitely in our business, if you treasure it, you measure it. And so we decided to draft our very first D&I strategy, because everything about our business is a strategy and is a plan. And if we were serious about D&I, it was definitely agreed that we needed a strategy to go along with that commitment. Slide, please. This is our work in progress, and one of the things I inherited was what I will call some loose affiliations, including the WISE 10 Steps program. So when I looked at the program, having been aware of it previously, I looked at the program and then I looked at what the business was doing to deliver on that program, and there was a bit of a chasm. So we started to redefine or refine our partnerships and affiliations. I'll politely say that in many cases, I guess like a lot of organisations, we were ticking a box. There was no real commitment to deliver on some of those partnerships and affiliations. The second thing we wanted to do was to make sure that we knew who we were employing. We knew something about our colleagues. And as I said earlier, our HR systems, information systems didn't give us anything that talked about personal characteristics or diversity. So our new system is going to give us that. It's going to give us the opportunity to capture our data better, or for the first time actually, and that's going to be on a voluntary basis. So we've got a hell of a lot of work to do to encourage and dare I say to coerce people to give us some real personal information. And we know from all the research and studies, the group of people less likely to want to volunteer some of that personal information are indeed the majority of our staff, which is white middle-aged males. Colleague voice, we immediately started to set up networks. We've set up networks for gender, for race and ethnicity, for disability, for sexual orientation, and for mental health. We've got a parent and carers network, and we've also got separate networks for female and male mental health. And I saw the stuff that WSP were talking about with regards to menopause. One of our first hits in terms of female health was indeed the menopause and the impact on menopause, you know, for not only women, but women at work and therefore the business. We looked at our executive leadership team, predominantly white. Until recently, as I say, there was a fairly good gender balance. So what I decided to do was to have some awareness sessions for them, because we really want our leaders to be the very best advocates they can when we start to talk about diversity and inclusion. So we set up and continue awareness sessions for our ELT right across the D&I strands that we target as well. Someone said earlier about internal and virtual sessions, and they called it Let's Talk About. We call ours Let's Talk About, and that's to bring about a much wider D&I awareness for our people in the business as well. We're looking at community engagements. One of the things that we're passionate about is as a monopoly, because the water industry is a monopoly, you know, we have a massive and rightly comprehensive customer engagement. So how do we make that work from a D&I perspective, and how do we start to build partnerships in our customer base, especially those so-called hard to reach communities as well. Last month, we actually finally launched our first ever D&I strategy, Together for Inclusion, Diversity and Equity. And part of the things we're starting to do within that is we've set targets for recruitment for gender, for disability and for ethnicity. And we've also set targets for our pay gap reporting as well, which has been challenging in the past, to say the least. Next slide, please. So these are the things that we're now looking at adding to the stuff we're already doing. So we're looking at targeted career development programs. I'm passionate about our women in STEM roles in our business, of which there are a third of all our STEM roles are for women. And now I think we need to have some targeted career development programs and plans for them. We've started a reverse mentoring program with our leadership. This year it's been on ethnicity. I now want to start to look at a reverse mentoring program around gender. We started to review our application processes. It's painful, if I'm going to be honest. So one of the things we're looking at is balanced shortlists and also balanced interview panels as well. And that's particularly difficult within our hierarchy as a business, but we're looking at how best we can change that. The data evidence, the data that we do get, we've started to collect, and that started to give us the insight that we need in order to plan our direction going forward. Different action plans, totally focused on delivering diversity. The STEM focus, as I said, we've got a Women in STEM network, and we're starting to now plan around their objectives and the work that we need them to do, especially in terms of collaborating with WISE and the 10-step program. And we've also started an early careers program. So for the first time, we're starting to decide exactly how many apprenticeships we're going to have every year throughout the business. And that means we're collaborating and working with schools and colleges in our operating areas. We not only operate in Northumbria, we also own Essex and Suffolk Water down the south as well. So there's lots for us to do. Although we've started on the journey, there's still much more to do for us as a business, and that journey continues. Next slide, please. And there you go. And that's it for me. I hope I've kept to time. I was very aware of the time and the rush towards lunchtime, Kay. So that's where we are as a business. As I say, the water industry per se has a lot of work to do. It started to do some work as part of the wider energy and skills and utilities programs and networks and partnerships. But as I say, I've only just started here. Been here 2 years, a very busy 2 years with a few more busy years to come. The first ever strategy has a lifespan until the end of 2025. And so, as I say, there are some really challenging targets in there for us, onwards and upwards. Thank you, Kay.
Thank you very much, Mickey. It'd be fair to say you hit the ground running. And it's music to my ears that just like WSP, you're treating it like any other business improvement project, and we'll catch up later and talk about that a little bit. So thank you. So finally, I would like to welcome our last expert speaker. So Andrea McFarlane. So Andrea is the Senior Manager for Culture, Equity, Diversity and Inclusion at AWE. Andrea has 20 years experience as a neurodiversity assessor and working in equity, diversity and inclusion. Andrea's also has a background in intelligence, languages and strategic communications, with her specialist area of interest being cyber psychology. Andrea, I'd love to hear more about that. Andrea has also led several academic longitudinal studies on resilience and has recently contributed to Kay Adams' book, Still Hot, which is a collection of stories about the menopause. And Andrea, perhaps maybe you can pop it in the chat for everybody. A keen advocate for social mobility and supports the Government Employers Action Group for progressing the inclusion agenda. Welcome, Andrea, and over to you.
Thank you so much. I'm really pleased to be here and sharing this journey with you. for those of you that were in the breakout group, I talked about the fact that I've been at AWE for about 6 months now. So working our way through this journey has been so helpful, and using the WISE framework has been something that we've really benefited from. And personally, I've benefited from, because it gave me a great start point for my new role. Thank you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, and I'm so pleased to have heard stories about neurodiversity as we've gone through today's sessions. So I'm going to link a little bit further into there as well. We talk about our results and what we did and how we built on those results, and look at a little bit more in depth the neurodiversity piece. So these are our results, and I'm really pleased to share them with you. I know that they're confidential, but I'm pleased to share them because we use these as our stepping off point and when I first started in my role. And you can see our graph, our web looked kind of narrow at certain points, and we did a bit of analysis on why that was happening and what had gone on before I had arrived at the company to help us look forwards. And some of the things that weren't in place were because there had been a gap in the post, and I'm sure lots of you have experienced that at various points in your careers. And sometimes that's a difficult start point, because people are so desperate to get moving on things that you can often rush forwards, and that can hinder progress in a productive way. So what we did was we did some analysis, and we took some themes from the WISE results, and we decided that to be able to work with the changing mindsets and connecting our perspectives, that would be what we would capture from that perspective, from that angle, and then we'd look at maximizing potential. And some of the stuff I've heard shared today has been fabulous, because I've got some great ideas. I've taken lots of notes. So thank you for being so open in how you've shared your results and your ways forward. So we go on to the next slide, and I'll show you my visualization. So I'm quite a visual person. And so this is the picture that came to my mind. Many years ago, I was a member of a slacklining community, and there's a whole YouTube video to go alongside that, which, if you want a bit of a laugh, please have a look at that. And this is how I visualized where we needed to go. So we've got somebody sitting supporting us. So with this group, and with WISE, we've got the sharing, learning and good practice. So in my experience, I had somebody supporting me as I sat on this really thin line. I'm having to overcome my mindset, and I'm having to challenge what everybody else is telling me about being there as well. I've got somebody filming us, a really good friend, taking some pictures of us and sponsoring me to be there. And then retention and development. So that's making sure that everything's secure underneath and holding me on there. I'm tied in, by the way, over the Colorado River. And then underneath us, it is completely around me was this transparent. And I think for me, this visualization really helped me put in place how the company was. So I was in an open door environment where people really wanted us to succeed in ED&I. And there were some really solid foundations in our working groups and some of the specialist interest groups. So I thought I would share this image with you, because this is where my head went when I was trying to visualize how we would move forward. Next slide, please. And the next thing I did was I looked at how I could bring some of my expertise into the company, and I love the way that we've heard about neurodiversity already today. I didn't know what whether some of the words we were using, and certainly from an assessor's perspective, it's really important to get the definitions right, because sometimes these get mixed up in the way that we engage with the words surrounding neurodiversity and I thought it'd be helpful just to have this slide in there. But more importantly, on the bottom of the slide, I want to talk about the norm and what we consider to be societal norms, because this is where, when I talk to people about the divergence or differences from the norm, I think sometimes this bit gets lost. And I think what's important to emphasize is that the middle piece of the bell curve, that peak, is where most people sit in our society, and there's about 40% of people sit in there. So within our companies, that's what our curves look like. So we've got a 40% norm, and then we've got another 10% either side of that, that makes it a 60% not normal way of working, if you like, or normal way of thinking and approaching things. And then at the other sides of that, we've got the differences. Now, I've done a bit of analysis at AWE, and our graph is slightly skewed to the right slightly for neurodiversity, because and probably like many of your companies, you're recruiting talent that often requires different ways of thinking. So therefore, the adjustments that we make in our everyday work, working practices, or accessibility of how we manage the daily functioning or access to the functioning of our work, and needs to skew slightly from perhaps what we're used to in our day-to-day lives outside work. And sometimes that can be quite a shift, especially if you're coming in new to the company, or especially if work practices change through something like compliance or regulation. The shift can be quite difficult if you're working to a skewed graph. And I thought it was important to say that, because when I've been approaching AD&I within AWE, I have to keep that in mind, that sometimes the change isn't quite the same as what the societal change is. Sometimes something else needs to happen to make that change more accessible for our company. And usually that's because of the neurodiversity within the talent pools that we've got. I hope that's helpful to share. Next slide, please. Oh, I don't know what's going. Yeah, there we go. So I used that insight that I have to be able to do a bit of planning, and this is some of the results of the forums and working the action groups that we did. And one of the fundamental things that people wanted was a welcoming workplace, and that tied in with lots of the stuff I had fed into me when I first started to help us complete our evidence and our input for the 10 steps. So we wanted it to be passionate and authentic. And there was lots of things about the communication and the way we communicated things, and being able to ask people what their enablers were. So not necessarily focused on barriers, but what somebody needed to be able to come along with us on the AD&I agenda, because like some of the previous speakers have said, lots of our population is predominantly white middle class male. And we need to make sure that we don't exclude our majority of our workforce in the journey towards AD&I and Nirvana. So working out what their enablers are, working out what the company needs to move forward, I think is really important, and not blanketing it. So not making assumptions that one solution or one initiative is going to fix everything. And goodness, if it was that way, wouldn't it be much easier? And just to enhance the piece that's gone before about our neurodivergent population, I agree. So 15 to 20% in UK society are neurodivergent. I think at our company it sits somewhere between 25 and 30, so it's slightly shifted. And the piece to note on there is that the number of people who have an autistic diagnosis is extremely high compared to the normal population. And a lot of that is about accessibility to interviews and being able to make those accommodations and enable somebody to take part in interviews so that they can demonstrate their skills and demonstrate their talent to companies. So for us, it's thinking about how we can best do that. And there's some great practice out there from companies such as Microsoft, and GCHQ have a great program as well. So we're doing some work with them to try and build a program to help us enable some of the community that aren't able to access our onboarding and interviewing processes at the moment. Next slide, please. I'm aware of time, so I want to make sure I cover this bit. So this is our mapping. So going back to me sitting on the slack line over the river, this is how I mapped onto our behaviour. So we've got a new set of behaviours this year, and we've just done an experience, an immersive experience where using the cyber psychology insights, so using technology to help people access their brains and to access experiences and learning. We did an immersive experience to share our behavioural framework, and I've mapped our journey, our ED&I journey for the next probably 2.5 years onto that. And this is how I've done it. So we've got lots of the neurodiversity pieces in there, especially to do with the equality analysis. So we're subject to public sector equality duty, the due regard piece. And so mapping that into the equality analysis has been really helpful from an intersectionality perspective, and how we share our learning and good practice, taking that from a neurodiverse perspective as well. We've done some work on menopause and menstruation as well, and we're hoping to progress our policies over the next few months on that. And we took the advice, so from those narrow sections of our results from our web, we've got on board with mentoring circles programs, so where people can be mentored and can be menteed, and it's a sharing environment rather than reverse mentoring or just straightforward mentoring. It's shared. Thank you so much. Next slide, please. And this is how we're planned our maturity. So we're sitting somewhere around probably 3/4 quadrant in there at the moment. So we're working on embedding. I don't think it's as linear as this arrow would portray. We're probably developing all the time and reviewing, and thanks to the benchmarking that we use, it enables us to keep the evidence, to engage with forums, and to do our reviews and think about what we can do better as we go through our journey. I thought it would be useful to share our index. And in our index, we've got external and internal benchmarking, and we put it through an algorithm to give us an overall measure. So we use several external benchmarks, but we use things like our employee engagement surveys, our forums, our feedback system that we have as well. But we've just had a chat on pronouns, for example. We use that to help us measure where we are on this. And that's it. Thank you. Next slide, please. There we go. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I hope that's a helpful insight into what we're doing at AWE.
Hi, thank you very much, Andrea. That was really insightful, and I learned a lot there as well. And I guess it really reinforces what Barry said earlier, you know, that intersectionality really is in everything. So thank you for that. We'll now move to the Q&A for Mickey and Andrea. So Samaya, could you tell me, are there any questions in the chat?
I'm afraid no questions in the chat.
Okay, then we'll open it up to the audience. And Wise team, can you please help me with calling out names, because I'm looking on a tiny laptop screen and I possibly won't be able to read the names. Does anybody have any questions for Mickey or for Andrea? Yes, I see a hand up, but I'm really sorry because I can't see your name, but initials are TW.
Hi, that's Tina Wharton.
Tina, hi Tina, thank you.
Hi, thank you very much. So let me just take my camera off so you can see me. So thank you both. It was great to hear your perspectives. I would love to hear more, Andrea, about how you pull together all of those different data sources to give that overall picture, because I think that's really powerful in having that evidence when looking at, you know, how to prioritize your strategy for DE&I. So I think we've in Northrop Grumman, we've got all of the tools. We've got our ERGs, we've got a DE&I working group, we've got an employee survey, and I'm working with the ERGs to get that employee voice as well. But pulling all of that together into something that's coherent, I think is really challenging. So I'd love to hear a little bit about how you managed to tackle that, please.
Thank you. Yeah, with a lot of help, I think, is my answer. I trained as an analyst actually really early on in my career. So when I was a teenager, my first job was as a data analyst. So I think that gave me a good grounding. And what I did was I looked at some good practice across industries, and I looked at running some models of how we could weight the importance of equity, diversity and inclusion. So I split it up into the different sections. And then I looked in, for example, the employee engagement survey, I looked at the different answers. So we use Best Companies. I looked at the different strands of that and to where they fitted under equity and diversity mostly. And I took those sections and put them into my model. And then I'm looking at my screen because I've got it up here. I then use things under equity. I use things like our ethics review. So we do an ethics review every year. And we also have the pay gap data. So I put that in there, and we have a cultural audit. So it went in, and equity came out at about 20% of the value of ED&I. So there's a 20% weighting in there of 5 elements. And then under diversity, so diversity played about 50%, came out through the model. And in there was our dashboard. So we have our data, so our inclusion data, so the demographic data goes in there. Our pipeline data, so who's in the pipeline, and our leadership demographics as well sat in diversity. So that's kind of the look of the business really. And then the inclusion piece was 30% of the, and that I guess is the result of what we do, the inclusion piece. And in there was our external benchmarks. So our 10 steps was in there. ENEI is the other benchmark we use. We use the WEI from Stonewall, and we use Working Families Index. So that gave us our inclusion data. And the piece of belonging and value came from our internal forums and things. So there's a piece of data analysis that I do, thematic analysis on on all the text that comes in through our forums and our sessions, and I do a thematic analysis on that. I hope that answers, and then it all goes in a big algorithm and spits out the number at the end of it. And we've trialed that now for about 3 or 4 months, and it seems to be fairly reliable. My confidence intervals for any data geeks out there are sitting around about 92%. So I'm getting better. The more I run it, the more I'm able to do the confidence intervals. So it's fairly reliable at the moment. Thank you for the great question.
Thank you for the great answer.
Thank you, Tina. Anybody else?
We have one question from Elaine for Mickey. Mickey, good progress with what you are doing, but how do you sustain support from the leaders when there is so much else to do?
Yeah, good question. One of the first things I talked about in terms of my lived and work experience to my leadership team was I used the term corporate courage. Because when you talk about D&I and you talk about change, especially in our industry, not only our business, but our industry, there are some difficult roads ahead. There are some real challenges in terms of the culture. Our culture is quite hierarchical. So one of the first things I talked about to our leadership was that they're going to have the courage sometimes to step into the unknown and to do things that might be unpopular, as long as they had enough experience and learning to know that they were the right things to do. So from a leadership perspective, for me, one of the first things that I wanted to ascertain was that not only was I going to get their support, but they were going to be courageous in some of their decisions. And so one of the things that came up quite early in the piece was sexual orientation and the very toxic conversation around transgender. And some of the proponents in that particular discussion were often writing to our CEO and demanding that we remove ourselves from the Stonewall Diversity Index program, or Diversity Champions, sorry, program. And I'll be honest, there was, I think, a direction that this is not something we should be involved in, and maybe it's best if we come away from it. And after 1 or 2 discussions, some of them very frank discussions about our journey and the need for corporate courage and the need to withstand criticism, because we truly believed it was the right place for our business to be at this time in our journey, we decided to stay with it. So for me, it is about corporate courage, or leadership, real leadership, as I call it. And I knew that was going to be the challenge for me when I first came here, simply because of the structure of the industry that we're in.
Thank you, Mickey. Samaya, any other questions?
Sorry, I was on mute there. We do have another question. How do EDI considerations differ between the fire service and the water industry? Have you had to change your approach?
I've had to change my approach because certainly when I started to do the work that me and others did in the fire service, it was 15, 20 years ago. And what I say about the water industry, the demographic is almost identical in terms of colleagues. Just that the water industry seems to have nicer people. Yeah, of course I've had to change my approach. You're dealing with different times, different perspectives. I work predominantly, as I say, in the Northeast. So when we start to talk about things like ethnicity and other types of inclusion conversations, there's probably a regional perspective around some of those things. So yeah, absolutely. My approach has had to be different. I've had to, modify some of the ways that I would do things, predominantly working out of London previously and some of our bigger cities where we have a innate understanding of some of those discussions. And I'm finding that that's not necessarily the case, where I currently live and where I currently work. So yeah, absolutely, you have to change your approach, because ultimately it's about communication and it's about engagement, and in order to do that you have to know what your landscape is in the first place.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mickey and Andrea. We are at time now, so I'm just going to call a 30-minute lunch break. After lunch, I really would love everybody to return. We will be moving straight to breakout sessions after lunch, and the sessions are for best practice sharing and addressing solutions to the problems around the lowest scoring points of the diagnostic. So enjoy lunch and we'll see you shortly. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.